Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you.
Happy Monday, Dr. Paul.
Very
How
good.
are you?
Yeah, doing good. Well, ready and raring to go.
Excellent.
We want to talk about an incident that happened just recently. It was in the news last week.
Yeah.
It has to do with, unfortunately, one of our close allies. Mm-hmm. And that has to do with Saudi Arabia, and it had to do with this this story that 37 executions were carried out by beheading, and who knows for what. Sometimes you never know, and I just don't believe it is likely that they were terrorists or anything like that. But anyway, it was pretty massive, and we've been pretty close to Saudi Arabia, and of course, the subject of the Yemen war has come up constantly. We're close buddies there, and just think over 200,000 people have died there, maybe a lot more. And of that 200 and some thousand, 60% of the civilian deaths were under 5 years of age. Wow. So it's all for the children, to take care of the children. But this whole alliance with Saudi Arabia is annoying to me because it's been sort of an understanding even back in World War II. Afterwards, we need their oil and we'll take care of them, and it continues. But it has morphed into something that Trump is very blatant about. So you give him credit for that, because most of the time they wouldn't claim that we're doing this to make money and profits. But he is very blunt about this, that in his speech in Wisconsin, I believe, he said, they're too good at customers. We can't challenge them. Even if his own CIA said that Ben Salman was probably involved in Khashoggi's murder, no, but they're good part of it. Matter of fact, Trump just says he doesn't believe that part. So I guess the CIA, of course, we question what the CIA says also. But anyway, this has been going on, and we're close buddies with them, and it brings up the subject of this whole coalition over there, which I see as mostly anti-Iran than anything else. But we have a coalition which is an unwritten coalition in many ways. It's Saudi Arabia, it's United States, and it's Israel. Yeah. And they don't even have a treaty. But boy, they're together. So, but Trump admitted that we can't offend the Saudis because we make a lot of money. We sold $450 billion worth of weapons. People challenge that. And this is not new. Trump is just new and different. He's too honest for the people to say, holy man, and then they blame capitalism. But Obama, had sold a lot of weapons there too. And it's all the deal, oil for weapons. So this was, to me, very disturbing to see how these beheadings occurred. And then we're close allies with this. Everybody knows about the civil liberties that are abused in Saudi Arabia. And everybody knows, of course, that the greatest purveyors of violence and terrorism, civil liberty violations is Iran. They know that. But we're best friends with Saudi Arabia, and that is disturbing. This is a lot different than trying to work out difficult situations that you might do in a time of war and talking to different people like in World War II. This is so unnecessary to have these kind of alliances. This is not diplomacy. This is crony capitalism at its worst, and the deep state being exposed for what they're all about.
Yeah, absolutely. And remember the quote from Trump when the whole thing with the MBS came out in Khashoggi. He said maybe he did, maybe he didn't, whatever. But President Trump's first trip abroad was to Saudi Arabia and Israel, and I think that's kind of shaped and framed his presidency. Really, and it told us what his values are. When he first went overseas, he went to Saudi Arabia, May 21st, 2017. He gave a speech, and here's a good clip from the speech. It's probably worth having a look at. The first clip that we have, this first quote. He says, "We're not here to lecture. We're not here to tell other people how to live, what to do, who to be, or how to worship. Instead, we're here to offer partnership based on shared interests and values." Shared interests and shared values. And here you have 37 people. 34 of the 37 were Shia. The largest execution of Shiites in Saudi Arabian history. Wow. It was noted as the biggest execution in 3 years, and the largest since MBS rose to be the heir to the throne. The only thing positive I can say about it, in a sick sort of way, is at least it was out in the public, in the open. You know, they didn't try to hide it behind closed doors. This is what you want. This is what you get. You know.
But what they see is intimidation.
Yeah.
This is the warning to stay in line.
You're next.
And also a warning to the Shia.
Yeah.
You know, this is a Shia-Sunni war that's going on, and we're in the middle of it. And that's why it's always Iran versus Saudi Arabia. But instead of us picking, you know, true free markets and practice of voluntarism, we chose to go with an authoritarian thug that you know has no sense of what civil liberty is all about. So it to me is a real tragedy on what's happening. But the real tragedy also is us going along and putting them on a pedestal almost, that they can do no wrong because we can make some money off of it. And this just to me goes along with this whole idea that the military-industrial complex is a big part of the deep state. There's a lot of money involved there, and it involves a lot of militarism. They say that ours, or at least my interpretation, is relatively close to the truth. Can you imagine that justifying us going into Yemen?
Yeah.
Or the Middle East? Matter of fact, it still involves because, well, if we shut the oil off on Iran, we might come up short. So Saudi Arabia has to pump more, but we better get control of Venezuela.
Okay.
You know, they're second in number how much oil there is. Oh yeah, we'll get in control of them. But already there's somebody doing it in a more capitalistic way. The Russians and the Chinese, those guys are in there investing. And getting a foothold of that country. But no, we have to think about the military approach and the coup that we have to commit to change leadership there. Put our CIA guy involved in charge.
And you mentioned the Khashoggi killing, and there was a big outcry. There was an uproar. Even Congress woke up for a few minutes before it went back to sleep about that. But there was an uproar, and Trump was forced to make a statement. And here's a statement he made. This is our second clip that we have that Trump made on the killing of Khashoggi, and I think it underscores what you said. He said, after my heavily negotiated trip to Saudi Arabia last year, the kingdom agreed to spend and invest $450 billion in the United States. This is a record amount of money. It'll create hundreds of thousands of jobs, tremendous economic development, and much additional wealth for the U.S. $110 billion will be spent on the purchase of military equipment from Boeing, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, and many other great U.S. defense contractors. So the message was, who cares about this guy getting sliced up inside of their embassy? We got lots of stuff to sell.
And when you think of the money that is involved, now Trump makes the point, he said, well, it comes out of our military budget to defend the country, $4.5 billion. But all of this activity is a diversion of funds. It isn't free market distribution of funds, real purchases. And I'm always reminded of the position Henry Hazlitt said of what? You say, yeah, but it's good. He even mentioned it's good for jobs. And we've heard that argument when in Washington, that, war sometimes is good. It's good for jobs. So, but they don't want to ask the question that if the people spent that money instead of the government, how would they have spent? There might be a lot more money here. Maybe there would be more money for schools. And maybe if you had a good monetary system, prices wouldn't be soaring. And you would have more money for medical care. They never ask that. Trillions and trillions of dollars. Then if they get into trouble, if this manipulation, all these sales, if it gets into trouble, well, we got to save it. We got to bail them out. So we saw that they've been doing that for decades, but the big bailout just occurred 10 years ago, and they better be prepared because they're going to need a bigger bailout when this one comes unglued. So, but they never want to ask instead of what? This is why we work hard at trying to be, as accurate as we can with the president, but he provides a bad problem for us because he epitomizes what American capitalism is all about. No wonder there's people they're attacking it. This thing is a mess. Look at this, and these guys keep getting richer. This is why we need socialism.
Yeah.
Well, the one point is this is not. It's not free markets.
No way.
It's pseudo-capitalism. It's crony capitalism. It's something else. The term that I like to use when you see this kind of stuff happening, when governments and corporations get on, is corporatism.
Yeah.
And people say, well, this is the corporation's a corporation. We got to outlaw. No, you have to outlaw the government.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Get rid of the government coalition and make everybody live with free market principles, and you don't have to worry about this.
Exactly. We'll call it beltway capitalism. But some of the details of these executions are pretty grim and pretty disturbing. Not the specifics of what they did, which I won't get into because it's even beyond that. But a couple of these people we're talking about, this one fellow, Abdul Karim al-Hawaj, was 16 years old. Here he is, a picture of a young kid. Looks like he's got a future ahead of him. Shia, of course. He was arrested for sending texts to his buddies, alerting them to a protest, an anti-government protest. He was arrested, tortured, electrocuted, they said, and then ultimately disposed of by the government. But there are others. There's and forgive my pronunciation, I'm not an Arab speaker, but Mujtaba al-Swaikat, 17-year-old kid. He was ready to start his college at Western Michigan University, coming out to the U.S. for school. He was arrested for just attending an anti-government protest, badly beaten, even on the soles of his feet. And it's something you always talk about, which is interesting, confession. He confessed before he was executed.
Yeah. It is such a shame. And most Americans want to, and most Americans still believe that we set an example for the world, which is a bit of a stretch, because when you think of this 16-year-old kid being beheaded, for texting something, it just bothers me to think that, look at what we've done, during the Iraq War especially, and maybe still going on, is some of the torturing that happens.
Yeah.
I actually personally believe, and I have no concrete evidence, that we farm that stuff out, is what I think happens. But what about at the height of the criminalities of the torture camps during the Iraq War?
Abu Ghraib, yeah.
And Guantanamo.
Yeah.
But there was one example of teenagers being arrested. There was one, I think he was 16, and I don't know whether he ever got out or not, but for years and years and had been tortured many times. Yeah. And people say, well, they're bad people. They're terrorists.
Yeah.
They're terrorists. But they aren't. They were suspected of being terrorists. But once again, when you look at some of the things going on in this country, some of the accusations and the challenges and the punishments through our social work right now, with cultural Marxism, people can get punished and they're considered guilty. With some of these appointments being, they're guilty until you prove innocent and you have to defend yourself. So we have drifted a long way by having a standard set. But nevertheless, this is horrible. And the only thing we can say is, why are we aligned with these countries, that do this? And it looks like it's for profits.
For profits. But then I'm thinking, as you're saying that, you're talking about Guantanamo and Abu Ghraib. Maybe ironically we do have shared values, like Trump said, because we're doing a lot of this stuff. But can you imagine if Maduro in Venezuela had taken a couple of kids that were in the protests, beaten them up, electrocuted them, and then beheaded them in the middle of Caracas? You'd have John Bolton on the back of a tank rolling into town. These are situational ethics when it comes to our foreign policy. But you mentioned Yemen early on, and it's probably, you mentioned the statistics, but it's important to point out, and Dan Larison had a good piece of the American Conservative where he looked up, he noted a new UN Development Program report, UNDP report, just released on the effects. And again, as you said, 233 dead. But the shocking number that you pointed out, 60% kids under 5. This is a war of aggression started by the Saudis because they wanted to put their own guy in power as president, continued by the Saudis, and backed up by the U.S. So us criticizing this is not going against our non-interventionist principles. We're not telling the Saudis how to behave. We're just saying that this is not the kind of people that we should be doing business with as our government.
And if it's back and forth and justifying this activity, the people in office or all the politicians will just dismiss it, and that's not true. And that may be the case, but your point is yes, we might not be able to sort all that out, but what we can sort out is why do we align ourselves in this type of an arrangement? You can't say, well, it's okay, it's a good idea that we have a good deal with the Saudis. Just think over the decades, we never had, I have to qualify, we never had trouble getting oil, but in the 70s we had a lot of trouble getting oil. It was used against us even back then. So it's something that people don't think through, and they accept this idea. And the toughest part, but I think it's getting more blatant, the toughest part has always been that you're challenging one's own government, and then therefore you're unpatriotic and this sort of thing. But right now, certainly the people we talk to are starting to recognize that not only should the First Amendment protect criticism of our own government, it deserves the criticism. Evidently, this young boy that got beheaded was probably not even, he just a rally, the innocence of this 16-year-old. So they don't even pretend to have a First Amendment. But boy, I think our First Amendment is being challenged, especially when you think of the control of what one can do now in getting information out when it comes with cultural Marxism, as well as the coalition of the social media and our government.
Yeah.
I mean, they're the ones who provide the information to the government. And even on sales products, it's really amazing how powerful that technology is. Sometimes you don't even have to literally be connected with a computer or something. You might even be just looking at something, and all of a sudden, and now with this facial identification, there will be no privacy. And I think that it's going to be tough protecting our First Amendment rights.
No question about it. I'll just close by saying you may have seen this. There was an extraordinary moment on television over the weekend when the Iranian foreign minister was interviewed. I think it was on Fox News. He had a very interesting interview, but he warned President Trump, your advisors are leading you down a path to war with Iran. It's a path you don't want to go on. You said you don't want to start any new wars. He specifically warned of a false flag. And I think we need to be very concerned about that possibility. If you haven't had a chance to check that interview out, it's really quite interesting. I will note that we have just a couple of days left in our spring fundraiser. Ron Paul is the individual versus the collective is yours for your donation to the Ron Paul Institute. Your membership of $50. Of course, $100 will get you a signed copy. There's been an extraordinary demand for this, and we really thank you for your outpouring of support for the Institute and for this book. And we hope to hear from you in the next couple of days. Dr. Paul?
Very good. I watched that interview that you were talking about, and it was a good interview, and the foreign minister spoke very good English, but immediately afterwards it was followed up with an interview with Bolton. But the one thing about Bolton, I couldn't listen to that whole thing. I listened to a part, but he mumbled. I'll tell you why. He didn't have any concrete answers at all. He just sort of wanted to laugh it off. And Wallace was pretty good. He pushed him back. You're not answering the question. But so maybe a few people, I would think that things are better now than a year or so ago, even with the stations coming across and giving a little bit more openness to these discussions. And it may even be that the Democrats have had to back off with the embarrassment of Russiagate. But they have no shame, so it's amazing even if they do. But it may be better. I hope I'm just not looking for something that's not there. But I do know that the best we can do is look at these issues, study the issues the best we can, and give an opinion or try to speak the truth, because I still think the truth wins in the end. And that's what it's all about, I think. And I do also believe that when the time has come, ideas can have consequences, and I believe that the time has come and will come, and we are going to see some big changes in probably our own government and world government, and more challenges and monetary problems. And it's conceivable that you may see a world and say, holy man, we were supposed to go to Venezuela to clean that mess up and make them good American capitalists. And here, what have we done? We've turned more people into it. We're turning the world into it because already, true free market principles are not well adhered to. The one last point I made earlier, I'll make it again, is this whole idea of this contest between socialism and American capitalism. Well, when you see our president saying, well, we need to sell more weapons for jobs and profits, and this is a good deal. Well, that is not free market. And unfortunately, capitalism has a bad term for it. But this is no way a contest between socialism and free markets. And that is why it's so important to understand what free markets are all about, where everything is done voluntarily. The government's out of the business, and government is small, where it can't be owned by the corporation. If government had little power, there'd be little incentive to spend all this money on elections and little incentive for all the lobbyists. It's the reason that is there's something to be bought. You eliminate that and you're going to have a much better system of government, but people have to have greater confidence that that people can be well off without the government interference. But one thing is don't let people get away with saying, yes, we have to do something with this capitalism that is existing, which they imply is free market. What we have to say is this is not it. This is corporatism at its worst, and that we don't like it. What we want is freedom, free markets, civil liberties, and a foreign policy where we mind our own business and then spend all those trillions of dollars here at home and let the people decide how the money should be spent. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.